Hi everyone, and welcome to my channel. Today, as part of my Creative Inspiration series, I'd like to introduce viewers to the work of photographer Penelope Taylor. Now, probably more than any other photographer whose work I've shown in this series, I need to explain why I find her work inspirational. And the reason for that is that she is an infrared photographer. And as most of you know, it is very easy to spot and see an infrared photograph. You know the look: white puffy clouds, black sky, white foliage, and a somewhat ethereal glow. And so it's very easy to get lulled when shooting infrared into shooting scenes just like that, cloudy skies with foliage. It's very easy to be lulled into shooting those sort of things. But, to my way of thinking, that's really not vision. That's more showing off what a technique can do. And a technique really ought to enhance a photographer's vision, I think, and not be the vision. And it's in that way that her work really shines. I'm drawn in not by the infrared look, but by the feel of her compositions and the feel of her images. She uses infrared really to transmit and enhance the feel of her composition, not the other way around. And again, I think that's the strength, at least I see that as the strength of her photography. So let's take a look at some of her photos. And as an added bonus in this video, if you wait till the end, I had the opportunity to email her some questions in sort of a mini interview format. And she was kind enough to send some answers. And so I'd like to read them to you, and so she can answer some questions that I had and maybe other people might have after seeing her work. And in addition to that, she also wants to offer viewers a free ebook that she's putting out on infrared photography. And again, at the end of the video, I'll have information on how you can get yourself a copy of that. So let's take a look at some of her work. Her website, which is entitled The Ethereal Image, is, I think, quite appropriately named. I'm going to leave a link to her website in the video description. But now, let's look at some of her work, which I have arbitrarily assembled into some groupings on my own. First, some of her beach and water images, which to me have a very abstract feel to them. Changing from a wet to an arid environment, we now have some of her intriguing desert images. And of course we have her infrared trees, but to me these look very different from the usual IR tree photos one frequently sees. Her rural and farm photos transmit a feeling of tranquility. Finally, a small assortment that I enjoyed that I had difficulty categorizing. Well, I hope you enjoyed and were inspired by seeing Penelope Taylor's work. Now, infrared photography is so different from visible light photography in many ways that I thought it'd be useful to see if I could do a mini interview of sorts with Penelope by email. And she kindly agreed, and I asked her 5 questions, and maybe they're questions that you might have as well. So I'd like to read them to you as well as read you her answers. So my first question was, while some people might occasionally decide that they want to shoot infrared, you shoot almost exclusively in IR. What attracted you to infrared so intensely that you essentially gave up visible light and focused solely on infrared photography? Her answer: I've been shooting digital black and white infrared exclusively since 2015. At the time, I was exploring converting visible light color images to black and white, but I was never happy with the conversion. They always seemed dreary, lifeless, dark, and depressing to me. But once I got one of my cameras converted to infrared, and I converted those IR images to black and white, I found that I liked the way the infrared light reflected the foliage and other objects, such as rocks and metal. It seemed to be visually lighter and airier compared to a color to black and white converted image, and that really drew me into infrared photography. My second question: how do you assess what's going to make a good infrared image? Her answer: when I first started in infrared, I was curious and fearless. I shot everything and anything in IR just to see what would happen. I had nothing to lose. Most people tend to think that an infrared image should be loaded with foliage so that it turns white in a black and white conversion. And when I started, I too was drawn to that type of image. Today, I'm drawn to scenes where there's enough foliage that will render white, but not overpower the scene. Your eye needs a place to rest when viewing any piece of artwork, so negative space is as important to me as the subject. And with that, I've moved away from images with a lot of foliage or puffy, cloud-filled skies. And I have to say, that's what I had mentioned about her work that really drew me to her work in the introduction. My third question: what's your favorite subject to shoot in infrared? I'm a die-hard landscape shooter. I physically feel so much better being outside by myself. I love long exposures of water and clouds, so the coastline's a favorite spot. In recent years, I've been drawn to the U.S. Southwest, where I find a perfect combination of foliage and desert plants and rocks, the big landscape, as well as more intimate scenes. For the past couple of years, I've also been exploring the night sky, lit by moonlight into dawn, which is an amazing time for infrared light. Infrared cuts through any haze in the atmosphere, and it's quite amazing to see all the stars in the desert with defined, wispy high clouds that the bare eye could not see. Question number 4. I notice that your infrared images are all black and white. Have you ever thought about shooting the wavelengths of infrared that give you color images? And why do you prefer the deep infrared that yields black and white? I have personal technical issues with processing color visible light images. I'm not happy with results in visible light. So to add faux color processing to that workflow confuses me even more. Once I removed the color from my compositions, and I set the image review to be in monochrome on my camera, which is actually sort of pretty interesting, I have found to concentrate on shapes, forms, lines, and not on color. When you remove the color, you're left with the bones of the image, or the essence of the image. You can easily see if you have a subject and how that subject's lit. And I find that black and white is timeless. You have no idea if the image was made 50 years ago or 50 minutes ago. I have found that for black and white work, truly the best wavelength of infrared light is 720 nanometers. It has the broadest range of tonality. It's also the closest equivalent to Kodak HIE black and white infrared film, which I really like to emulate in my processing. My fifth and final question: what advice do you have for anyone thinking about getting started in shooting infrared? And her answer are: gear options are your first consideration. Sensor filter or lenses filter. A lens filter is the least expensive option, but requires a very long exposure. A tripod will be needed. And with a long exposure, the foliage moves around, leading to a blurry landscape. A dedicated camera to shoot only IR requires a conversion company to remove the hot mirror filter over the sensor and install an IR filter. You can't use the camera for both IR and color, and you're locked into that nanometer conversion. This has been my choice because exposure time isn't compromised, and I can easily handhold or use a tripod. Which nanometer to choose? That depends if you want to process for faux color, in which case choose 590 or 665 nanometers, or black and white, in which case shoot 720 or 850 nanometers. If you like my work, I recommend 720. Another point, IR is not hard to learn, but like any topic you want to master, you need to immerse yourself in it to learn it. Many of my clients dabble in IR, and others try to apply visible light rules to IR shooting. For example, you never use a polarizer on an IR converted body. A polarizer was developed for use in visible light. IR is different. With experience learning how your IR gear works in different conditions like different humidity, altitude, or quality of light, you will master IR. Now, as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, Taylor has written an ebook which is titled How to Get Started in Digital Infrared Photography. That ebook is going to be ready in September, which is just right around the corner. So if trying out IR is something that interests you, I think that this will be a great source of information. And Taylor's giving it away free to people on her mailing list. I'm going to leave a link to her mailing list in the video description, and you can go ahead and get that ebook for free. In addition, she also gives IR workshops and Skype classes on her website link, which I will leave that for you in the video description as well. Now, in addition to her website, Taylor actually puts most of her new work on her Instagram account. And so in the video description, I'm going to leave a link to that as well if you want to see her new work over the last number of months. So all interesting stuff. I really hope you enjoyed this. I'm Howard, and this channel is about introducing viewers to photographers who inspire, to discussing all sorts of photographic topics, and to enhancing creativity with Photoshop and Lightroom tutorials. And if those topics sound interesting to you, I do hope that you'll support the channel by clicking on the subscribe link below. We'll see you next time.